to In the News for February 21, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD.
Hello, Jeff, and congratulations, my friend, on people would go to iPhoneJD.com. They may notice something just a tiny bit different, but it's not that much different, Jeff, that they would probably think about it. But I know about it just simply because I've been friends with you for a long time and I followed the site for so long. But there was a little bit of a minor change on the back end, and it looks fantastic. A little bit cleaner, a little bit nicer. This is great. Congratulations on the move.
Thanks. I'm really happy about it. I'm very happy about it. I've been thinking about moving to something like WordPress for years now. And when I looked at it seriously in the past, it was just so difficult. It was way above my, knowledge of how to do it. And I tried and I just didn't like it. But I finally decided to do it last year and have been working on it the last couple of months. You were the one who suggested to me, and I mentioned this for anyone, that, I think about my law practice. If someone comes to me with a legal issue, of course I'm going to help them. But like, if there's a tax issue that comes up, I bring in a tax attorney, right? If there's a wills and estates issue, you bring in a specialist. And I realized, and you're the one that convinced me this, and you were telling me what I should have already known, that like the things that I could not figure out on WordPress, I'm an attorney. I'm not like a web developer. And so you had suggested this service called Fiverr, Fiverr, where you can like find people that you can hire. And so I went in there and I found somebody to hire that was an expert in web development. And oh my goodness, I mean, I could not have done it without that. It was just so amazing. It was this guy. I mean, he happened to be located in Bangladesh of all places, but he like totally knew this stuff cold, and he was able to get stuff moved for me and do a bunch of stuff. And so then we did it. So the new website looks a little different than before. I mean, there's 2 columns instead of 3. I figured we didn't really need the 3 columns anymore. That was just the way TypePad used to do things. But like from a user standpoint, like first of all, it is so much faster. And just to say something quickly about that.
Yeah, people will notice that immediately. That's great.
One thing I did not know at first is that WordPress is not like a specific, I mean, there is a WordPress company, but WordPress is a platform. In fact, there's WordPress.org, which is the platform, and there's WordPress.com, which is one of many, many companies that offers WordPress. So I actually did not go with the WordPress itself. I found another company that happens to be called Rocket.net that's more expensive, but they are just super fast. And there's a million technical reasons I'm not going to go into as to why that's true with things like Cloudflare, but they are just so fast. And I'm like, you know what, if I'm going to make this change, I'm, whatever, I'm not making much money off of this, but it's, why not have something that I can be proud of? And the idea that the websites load just so darn quickly.
Amazing how quickly. It's just, they're like blink of an eye. That's great.
It's blink of an eye. It's stable. Things are there. And the thing about the TypePad site, TypePad has not really been in development for a long time. And I felt like my old website was being held together by Scotch tape, so many things that just were not working well. And now everything is real. I mean, it's complicated behind the scenes, but just from the standpoint of people that are reading the website, everything is going to be faster. It's going to be cleaner. Things should be loading correctly. There should not be downtime. So I'm very happy about it. So anyway, I mean, enough discussion about that, but we all know that when you make big changes like this of any kind, there's some learning curves, but the end result is going to be nice. So I'm still finding little things here.
It looks the same, everyone.
I tried to make it look more or less the same.
Legal pad. It's okay. No panicking. It's all good. But yeah, that's the main thing. Just even go into it. It feels so much snappier, and I just like it a little bit cleaner. So congrats on that. And that's great because that's pretty much the only news that we had this week, right? Unfortunately, nothing else going on. Except Apple released a new iPhone. Before we get into that, just quickly, we want to say thank you to our sponsors yet once again. SaneBox. We'll talk a little bit about them in just a moment, but if you haven't tried SaneBox for a way to make your insane mailbox a little saner and a little way to grasp it a little bit, you can go to sanebox.com/in-the-news, all one word, sanebox.com/in-the-news, and get a little bit more information about SaneBox. We'll talk about them in just a moment. But first, let's get to the big news. And in fact, it's pretty much the big news that we were anticipating from last week, that Apple had this special announcement on Wednesday, and it was kind of cryptic. Like Tim Cook, I think, texted last week or, put on on Twitter or X with like, hey, we're going to welcome the newest member of our Apple family. And of course, I wanted to think that we were going to, maybe be getting a new, car or spaceship or something. I don't know. But no, like most people expected, it was a new iPhone. Now, but this wasn't like a Pro, not a bigger one, not a smaller one. It is the iPhone 16e, which fits just in a kind of a nice little sweet spot, maybe kind of toward the bottom, Jeff, but you did a great job of doing your review this week. And a lot of people have said, I think generally most people are pretty happy with the result that we got this week from Apple.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a solid product. This is the replacement of the iPhone SE, which Apple had 3 different versions of it over the years, which was
Right.
it was the budget iPhone. It was the one that would come out, and whenever it would come out, it would be, a little bit lower end, but not that low end. And then they would keep it around for a couple of years. And then by the end of the 3 years that it had been around, it might not, be the latest and greatest, but you'd save money on it. It was the budget iPhone. And so now this is the new budget iPhone, the 16e, and we can talk about it. I mean, if there's the only bad thing I've heard about it is that the starting price is higher, because you could have gotten an SE for $429. Now that's a 64 gigabyte version. This is 128, so it's not really apples and oranges. But the starting price of this one is $599. So again, it's not much of a difference if you compare the same capacity, 128 to 128, but it's a little bit more expensive. But things prices go up over time. But the flip from the other direction, it's $200 less expensive than an iPhone 16. Or Apple still sells the iPhone 15 from last year, and it's about $100 less than that. And I do think it's a better phone than the iPhone 15 in most ways.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking to just get a simple iPhone, maybe not for yourself, but maybe somebody else, that this is the one to get. And as I mentioned, my wife and daughter have used an SE for years and are very happy with it. My wife's a little upset that the button has gone away, which was one of the big changes, that we no longer have an iPhone with the button on the front.
You mean the Touch ID button?
The Touch ID button, exactly.
She likes the Touch ID. Wow.
Yeah, she sort of liked it. I mean, I don't get it. In my mind, having more screen real estate is better. This is like way back.
We'll have to talk.
When the iPhone came out in 2007, there were people that complained because I love the keyboard on my BlackBerry, and I'm like,
right.
I know you like that keyboard, but it's just a chiclet keyboard, and wouldn't you want to have all that space for like the display of the phone? So whatever. There are transitions, but this is truly, I mean, it's a modern iPhone. So like if you get this iPhone 16e, you're getting, the core features of a modern iPhone. It's just minus a few. And so that's sort of the difference. And I guess we could sort of talk about those things to decide if it's something that, would matter to you or not. I'm trying to think of where to start.
Well, how about just the name, just real quick, because what's in a name, right? And but it's so funny, and I think you linked to Dairy Fireball story, which I just thought was great, because John Gruber obviously has so much insight from over the years into this. But you may hear us not calling this the iPhone 16 SE, which I think a lot of people sort of anticipated or expected. They took out the S, which I think one of these articles that you linked to today pointed out that we never really fully knew from Apple officially what the S and the E stood for. There were some people that were guessing at it, but now we just took out the S, so now we're just E. So this is now the 16E, and I know I'm harping on the name aspect, but what's in a name is pretty important, because we now have the iPhone 16, then we have the 16 Pro, and this is now the 16E. So it goes, E, normal, and Pro, right? So it's like that's sort of the strata that we have on this now. And I just think that's important. Nobody knows exactly, again, what the E stands for. I know people were talking about the E could be for everyone, right? Because this is like the everyman's type of an iPhone. If you don't need the Pro or something, it could be exciting. It could be economical. I don't know what the E stands for. Apple says that it doesn't stand for anything, but I can't really take that at face value. It's like somebody in the bowels of Apple somewhere, somebody knows what the E stands for, but they're not going to tell us on there. But I mean, I know I've harped on that, but that's important. It's important to make sure that you know what you're looking for here, right? This is the 16E.
over the years, Apple has used these letters with its phone. I mean, it goes all the way back to when, the iPhone 3 came out. They had the 3G, and
Yes,
at the
that's right.
time, it was like, okay, the G makes sense because it supported the 3G network, which
3G,
was such a
exactly.
big advantage over Edge. And then they had 3GS, and they've had different letters over time. There was the iPhone 4, then there was the iPhone 4S. Some people would joke that the S of 4S
Right.
was
It's
for
weird.
speed. I even said that because heard some people say that because Steve Jobs passed away, 4S meant for Steve. I mean, who knows? But I
Oh,
think in some
yeah.
ways,
Okay.
Apple uses these little letters just on a whim. Maybe somewhere in some dark corner, there's somebody in the marketing department of Apple that has a real reason
Somebody
for it. The
decided on
SE,
E.
I always thought was like a special edition. They used to have the Apple Watch SE.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. That's good.
who knows? I guess they still do. But who knows? I mean, the letters are what they are. It might just be because somebody looked at marketing, like the name, and said, I like the way the letter E looks next to a 16. It could be as simple as that.
Could
So it
be.
really
It could
does not
be.
stand for anything, but it's a way for people to understand what this is. So
Yeah. Yeah.
of the things that go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to start talking. Let's talk about what's changed, like what they took away, and then at the end, I want to circle around and talk about the modem because that is something
Yes,
that's
please.
interesting.
Okay, good.
Um,
Yeah, we'll get to
one
that.
of the big changes was the camera system. This is a more simple camera in that it's
Yeah.
just got the one lens. So you don't have the wide angle lens, which is good if you want to like get lots and lots of stuff in a picture. And that same wide angle lens is used for macro photography, so you can get really close to
Right.
like a flower or something. And of course, you don't have the zoom lens, but the 16 didn't have that either. You had to go up to the 16 Pro to get that.
Right.
But
Right.
when I think about people, so many folks that I see out there using their phone, they use it the way that people used to just use a point and shoot camera. You take it out and you take a picture
Right.
and you're done. They're
Boom.
not
Right.
zooming, they're not doing anything. They just want to take a
Right.
picture. And for those people, if you're not really changing lenses, this is a substantially better camera than
That's
what you
right.
had with the SE. It's the same main camera that you have on the rest of the 16 line with some minor tweaks and things that it doesn't have that have more to do with software than hardware. So you're going to get like, if you upgrade from an SE to this 16E, you're going to get much better
Big
pictures. I mean, so
jump.
that's going to
Yeah.
be a huge increase, and you're probably not going to care about the other stuff. So even though for me, the camera is one of the most important things to the phone for me, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy getting the Pro with the latest and greatest. I don't think it's going to matter for a lot of people. And there's some
Yeah.
software things that you don't get, like you don't get the cinematic modes, and of course you can't record in stereo 3D because there's only one lens, not two, and things like that. But most people are not going to care about
Right.
that.
Well,
So
yeah,
I
I
think
feel
that that's
like
fine.
at this price point, I mean, you know that you're not buying the premium.
Right.
And so
Right.
if you want that, if you need that for whatever that you're doing, you know that you've got to pay a little bit more.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
immediately when I saw this, I thought the exact same thing that you mentioned in your review today. It's like you're going to know exactly what kind of iPhone someone has just by looking at the back. Like if they've got it
Right.
up to their
Right.
ear, it's like the iPhone Pro has 3 cameras, the iPhone 16 only has 2 eyes, and then the new 16E now is the Cyclops. It only has one. Like
Ha
you're
ha
going to
ha ha.
immediately be able to see what kind of an iPhone. And not like
Yep.
that's a big deal or anything, but for those of us that kind of follow this, it's like, wow, that's a little bit of a stark difference. And just to be able to kind of catch that on a whim. But
Yeah.
as you said, it is a significant upgrade. In fact, I think yeah, you talk about it here. The old iPhone SE had a 12 megapixel camera. This is a 48 megapixel fusion camera. Now they're doing some trickery here, right? With some lenses and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So you don't have that same kind of a manual, zoom. It's more of a
Hmm.
digital zoom. But still, to your point, Jeff, this is a fantastic camera. Even if it's just the point and shoot. I'm thinking about younger kids that just want to take pictures all the time, just like you were
Hmm.
talking about. This is really going to be a great camera, just for some basic photography.
Yeah. And the nice thing about the 48 megapixel is that it means that if you crop, you're still going to get a pretty good picture. And
Oh, yeah, good.
on
Yeah.
this new iPhone 16e, the only zoom modes is either 1x or 2x. And of course, the 2x is not an optical zoom, it's just a crop. But I don't mean to belittle it because on my phone, I
Yeah.
routinely use the mode that's the 2x mode. For example, if I'm taking
Same.
video
Yeah.
of my daughter playing basketball, and even though I
Right.
know it's cropped, it's not like it's a better lens, but like that's what I want. That's what I want in my image. It's still going to be
Hmm.
a really good image. It's when I'm using it, the camera to film things, I prefer having that cropped in mode where things are closer. So
Right.
it's no
Right.
slouch to have that 2x mode, even though it's not like true 2x with like a better telephoto camera. It's just cropping in on it. So that part's really good. And I think overall you're going to know what you get. There's no, you look, like you say, you look at the
Yeah.
back and you
Yeah.
instantly see you've got one lens, not two. But that one lens is going to be great. So I think that's a good feature.
You
When
also,
you
just real quick, you point out here there is no camera button like what you have on your
right, that brand
16
new one, yeah.
Pro, which again, to me, that's not a big deal because I think most people will either use the on-screen button, or you could
Hmm.
probably, I'm guessing, surely you can still use like the up volume button, right? If
Sure.
you are in like landscape mode, so it's not like you would lose anything. Again, I think for most people that are buying the 16E, it's not like that they're looking for additional buttons on the outside. Well, maybe
Yeah.
except for your wife,
Plus, you do
but
get
I
an
don't
additional
think.
button, Brett. You get the
Yeah.
action button, which is something new.
Well,
So
exactly. That's
if you're
right.
moving up from an SE, you've never had like an action button before. And if you wanted to say, every time I press my action button, launch
Yeah.
the camera, you could totally do that. So, you can
And
have,
that's
for
great.
all intents
Or
and
you can make it a
purposes, you have a
flashlight,
dedicated button.
right?
Or you can make it
I
a
mean, the
flashlight.
thing is,
Exactly.
the thing, I know it's silly, but I love having that action button. And I have found myself now fairly recently over the last couple of months that I will switch that back and forth. If I'm out on a hike, for example, and I want to have
Hmm.
quick access to my phone, I'll make it the camera. If I know that, I'm traveling and in a hotel room, where it could be dark, I'll change it to a flashlight. In other words, it's just really nice that I can be able to switch that back and forth. And I've gotten to start using that a little bit more. So I feel like, several things, and this is to me is one of them, that I feel like that the 16E has kind of adopted some premium type features. And I feel like
Hmm.
at least right now, that action button is one of those things that we saw sort
Sure.
of on the
Sure.
premium phones, including, I know, a few of the other things that you're going to talk about. It is now no longer a lightning cable. They have the USB-C, and some people may argue that's not really a premium feature, but I think that just kind of helps, bring everything else in. Like if you have other Apple products, you're going to be on
Right.
the Apple
Right.
on USB-C anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're getting to the point where so many things are USB-C that now your
Right.
iPhone will be too, and you're not gonna need to worry about your lightning cables anymore. So goodbye to the home screen button, goodbye to the lightning. It was funny. My wife was looking for a USB-C cable the other night, and I was dishing around, and I found like a 30-pin connector. Remember those old big 30-pin
Oh my
connectors? I'm like,
goodness.
I guess I have no use for this cable anymore. I'm sort of laughing that it was still there, but eventually lightning will go the same way. So camera is a big difference, and that's on the back. Flip it over to the front, and one of the things that you'll
Hmm.
notice is at the very top of my iPhone, I've had ever since last generation iPhone, the dynamic island, which
Oh
is this cool
yes.
place that
Love
like
it.
I'm using my iPhone for one thing, but I could glance up there and I can see like
Yeah.
the music that's playing and their podcast or whatever information. It can show one or two things up there. I really like the dynamic island. You're
Love
traveling,
it.
and like my flighty app will have like
Absolutely.
how many, my gate information and how long till I leave. So I like it. But again, it's just a nice to have. It's not something that you need to have. This SE, I mean, sorry, the 16E, I'm going to be saying that a lot.
Watch
In
your
fact,
tongue, Jeff.
I was listening to the Connected podcast this week, which has Federico Viticci, who's an Italian in Italy,
Right.
and they were joking that they should call it, instead of 16E, it's the 16E. Ah, the 16E phone,
16E.
16. It's the 16E.
Okay.
But anyway,
I like that.
the 16E has a notch at the top, just like we used to have years ago on the flagship phones.
Right.
So whatever, it's fine. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. It's a notch. You don't get you don't get whatever. The one that I've heard, and I linked to him today, there were some articles talking about whether this was the right decision or not, is that this iPhone, even though it's a modern iPhone in many ways, doesn't have MagSafe. MagSafe has been
Hmm.
around for, a very long time now, right? And when MagSafe first came out, I wasn't really using it at all. I didn't even see the value of it because I'm like, whatever, wireless, blah, blah, wireless charging, who cares? But then once standby mode came out, I mean, as I'm talking to you right now, Brett, I'm right below my monitor. I can see my iPhone showing me the time and the date and the
Yeah.
temperature
Yeah.
because it's on my charger in standby mode. Now, you could still use it if I had one of those chargers that had like a place for the iPhone to sit so that it was physically just sort of sitting on top of it. This new 16E does have wireless charging. So you could, if you
That's
get the
what,
right,
okay. I was
yeah.
going to ask.
But what it
Yeah.
doesn't have is the magnet. And it doesn't have the speed. Regular
Okay.
Qi
Okay.
charging is 7.5, whereas MagSafe and Qi 2 is twice as fast, 15. Again, it's still much slower charging than you would get with plugging a cable in, but it's nicer to have the faster charger. But for me, it's the magnet that's really key. So I love that I can just stick my
Agreed.
iPhone on my little anchor device, and then to pull it off, I just yank it off, and it's just a magnet, so it doesn't hold very much. And that's the main thing that I use the magnet for. But
Yeah.
they also have the battery packs that stick to the back with a
That's right.
magnet.
Uh-huh.
You've
Yeah.
got the a million, wallet, external wallets you can buy. There's a pretty big set of things that you could purchase that connect to that magnet portion. In fact, I've already seen some developers say that, so many people have a case for their iPhone, and they're going to be selling a case for the 16E that includes a magnet in it, just so that you could attach
Oh,
at least
interesting.
some. It's not going to work with all of them, but you could at
Yeah.
least do
Yeah.
some of the MagSafe stuff. So I guess that's good because a lot of people have a case. So,
Right.
some of these articles are saying like, oh, this is a really big mistake. Apple should not have omitted MagSafe. I don't think it's a mistake. I think that people moving up from an SE didn't have MagSafe before anyway. So I guess they're saving money. That's got to be the reason that Apple is doing this. But
Right.
it's an interesting omission.
But okay, so to be clear though, the 16E does support wireless charging. It just
Right.
doesn't support that MagSafe, which is a faster.
Yeah.
Did we have wireless charging in the old iPhone SE? Did that support wireless charging at all? That's
No.
what I'm wondering there. Okay, and
No.
and that's what I thought too. Okay, good, thanks. Because I mean, to me, that is at least a quasi premium upgrade.
Sure, you
in
get
the
something
fact that,
more. Yeah.
So in other words, like in our vehicle, in our family car, there is a wireless charger there, right? And I could take a 16E, put it on there. It just won't charge as fast. Or when I was traveling the other day, I was at a hotel where on this little table, they had the little circle for wireless charging. I don't know that it was MagSafe. I don't think that it was, because when I put my 15 Pro down, I didn't feel the magnet like grab it or anything. But theoretically, right, I could take a 16E and put it down on a wireless charger puck like that, like you would see sometimes, and it should charge. It just won't be as fast because it does support Qi 2. It just doesn't support
No, not Qi 2, just regular Qi.
Oh, just Qi. Just Qi.
just
Okay.
Qi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it does
And also
support
remember,
Qi,
Brett,
so
that
yeah.
one of the reasons that MagSafe was such an advantage over Qi is when you stick something on top of a Qi charger,
Yes.
you never know, did you get it in the right
Is it-
spot? Is
You
it
have
too
to
far
watch
to the
it. Is it
left?
turned-
Is it charging?
right.
Whereas with MagSafe, the magnets, it snaps to connect, and you have a good connection. And
It's
so
yeah, right.
with this 16E, you're back to the early days of Qi wireless charging, where you got to just double check
The
it.
old
Like,
days.
did I put it
Right.
in the right spot?
Yeah.
Did somebody knock it and it moved over a half an
remember.
inch,
Right.
and now it's not
Right.
charging anymore? So
And I think, by the way, you linked to something else here, right? That we're talking. Yeah, William Gallagher over here at Apple Insider. He's one of the ones that argues Apple cut too much by removing MagSafe.
Right.
I guess when I was reading these stories, this is what I was wrestling with. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I don't think we had wireless charging at all in the old SE. So at least that's something. I mean, that's
Yeah.
at least something there if you had that. But even if you did have a wireless charger and you had a cable right next to you and you could choose which to do, I'd probably go cable. And I think that's what William Gallagher here is talking about, right? Because I know the cable, first of all, is going to be a sure thing. When I plug it in, it's going to be charging. And number two, it's going to be faster. It's going to charge faster than it would if I did the wireless on there.
Right.
But in a pinch, at least, I do like the idea that I could have wireless charging. And that to me was a little bit of an upgrade. But I can certainly see, where some of these folks are coming. And frankly, just like you alluded to, I'm sure Apple has this long list of items that like, do we do this or do we do that, right? And you have to cut some things from this in order to get it under the price point here. And I felt like that this was one of the ones that they were like, yeah, we don't really want to because we know people are not going to be happy. But in the end, they probably had to decide that was one they had to cut out.
Yeah. So unless there's any other emissions that you want to talk about, because there are some other emissions, I just don't think that they're huge. Let's talk about this new modem. Okay. So
actually, real quick, can we talk about just the regular processor first, right? Because does this one not have the same processor that the iPhone 16 has? This is the A18, right? Is that what you put in there?
It's the same
Okay.
processor, but
Okay.
it's
Okay.
going to, it only has, I say only, it has 4 GPU cores instead of
Okay.
5. And
Okay.
my guess is that this is something called binning. You know, when people make these processors, these
Yes, we've talked
chips,
about that.
some of
Yeah.
them are going to test and like every single part of it's going to be great. And then some of them they'll test it and like one little part does, like one of the GPUs isn't working. And rather than throw out that chip, they will just save it as a 4-core GPU processor instead of a 5-core.
Okay.
Now,
Okay. Yeah.
remember, you've got the main processor on these chips, which is most of the things that you do with your iPhone. And then you've got the GPU, the graphical performance, which is things, it's not, it makes graphics faster. So for some games, but there's even
Right.
some things like
Right.
some forms of machine learning and stuff that work faster with the graphical. Now, for a regular person, having 4 versus 5 GPUs, I mean, the fact that something is going to take 2 fractions of a second instead of 1
Right.
fraction of a second, you're really not going to have the notice. I
Right.
mean, yes,
Right.
pro users like having the best, and so that's fine. But so for all intents and purposes, I think you can just say it's the same processor as the 16
Yeah.
line. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tiny bit slower, but it does have everything that A18 does support, which for example includes Apple Intelligence. And you know, Apple Intelligence, good, bad, or
Yes,
otherwise,
exactly.
is coming along. But you will be able to, between having the A18 and having 128 gigabytes of storage space, because you need to have more storage
Hmm.
space for the Apple Intelligence stuff, you can use Apple Intelligence. And again, I know Apple Intelligence is not the biggest deal right now, but it's going to improve over time. And if you get
Yes.
this phone,
Right.
like maybe later on this year, and then you hold on to it for 3 or 4 years, you're going to be
Right.
along for the ride of Apple Intelligence for the long haul, which is nice.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
that's another. It's a tiny
Well,
change. It's like there's some tiny
right.
screen changes too. This phone can't get quite as bright as some of the other phones. It can't get quite as dim, but again,
Right.
most people don't care about that.
You're not going to. Well, and again, I just wanted to hit on that regular or the main processor, the core processor there, just because again, I feel like that is sort of another kind of a quasi premium bump there. I mean, I feel like they probably had some A17 or 16 chips. Even I would not have
Hmm.
blamed them if they had put in,
Sure,
a
sure.
generation or two chip from before. But I feel like that's getting back to that thing I just talked about with the list. Like if you had to choose between going with MagSafe versus what if we put the A18 in there, because we want everybody to eventually get into the Apple Intelligence ecosystem.
Correct.
And the only way they
Correct.
could really get everybody there, even with a bottom of the barrel phone, which is not really a good way to call it, but if you have a budget type of an iPhone, they still want people to be in the Apple Intelligence, and this is the way they
Hmm.
did that. And to me, I was just a little surprised that they went with an A18. I felt like that they would have, I would have absolutely been happy if they put a 17 or a 16 or something like that in there. But like you said, it's just that GPU core that maybe, they just tweaked a little bit on there. But I think that was a great sign. And that just seems to kind of show, I think, where Apple is going from that. But as you started going to, I really think the biggest news here of this device is a new modem chip. We've talked about this off and on over the years because it's
Oh
no
yeah.
secret that Apple has tried one of the main pieces of technology in an iPhone is not made by Apple. They took over and did their own processor several years ago, and it has been an absolute home run.
Oh my
But
goodness.
they could never get away from the modem chip, which of course really makes the life of an actual phone. And this is the first one where they are trying their own hand finally at a modem chip. And I really think this is the biggest news of the device completely.
It is. And this is the one that's going to have significance for many, many years to come, not just for this one particular phone, but
Yes.
for future iPhones. As you alluded to, many years ago, Apple purchased a company in Israel called PA Semi, which was making their own
Right.
microprocessors. And Apple used that to create the chips that all of their custom chips that we use for the iPhone, for the Mac, for the iPad, the M
Yeah.
series, the A series, all of those.
So
And it has
good.
been so much better than what Intel and other people have been doing. It's been
Absolutely.
fantastic. And this is one of the things for the secret sauce. Not only is it a better processor, but since Apple creates it, they fine tune it for specifically what they need. So they're not buying something off the
Exactly.
shelf and adapting it.
Exactly.
They're making it's custom built. And so they've wanted to do the same thing for the modem for years. Making modems is hard. I mean, we know it's hard
Very.
because there are
Yes.
so few companies in the world that even do it. And the best one is Qualcomm. And so for years now, Apple has been purchasing from Qualcomm. They've been litigating against Qualcomm. It's been a whole thing.
It's been
But
weird. Yeah.
years, I want to say it was, I didn't look this up data, but I, off the top of my head, maybe 2019, it was a long time ago. Apple purchased, much like they purchased the company in Israel a long time ago, they
Right.
purchased Intel's modem division because Intel
Yes.
was one of the competitors
Interesting.
to Qualcomm. And for all of these years, we're like, gosh, we know that you purchased them. You've got all these engineers that you're paying year in, year out. What are you going to do with this technology? So
Right.
now we finally see. So they've come up with their modem. They're calling it the C1, like their other
C1.
chips. They've got the letter and the number. This is just the first generation of it. And I think it makes perfect sense. Take your first product that,
Right.
maybe it's going to encounter some issues in the real world because, modems
Right.
have to work
Right.
with I think there's 180 different cell phone carriers in the world,
Insane.
and they
Yeah.
all have little tweaks to how they do their communications. And so you
Right.
have to have a single chip that works with all of them. It's a big task. So the 16E is not going to be much like the SE. It's not going to be the best selling iPhone, right? It's going to be smaller sales, and people that use this budget phone are not looking for the latest and greatest. And so to a certain degree, I think they're going to be guinea pigs for Apple's new modem to see how it works, and they'll tweak it over time. This initial modem has all the features that you would want in a modem for a basic modem. It's missing some of the edge features. For example,
Okay.
if you have 5G, there's something called the milliwave feature of 5G that in theory
Okay.
could allow communications that are, super, super, super fast, as fast as the fastest cable modem and optic, but they work in a very small area. So right now, if you want to support this, I think AT&T calls it 5G plus, or these other ones that Verizon has
Right.
their millimeter, you have to go to in certain, a sports stadium might support it just within the stadium, or a certain part of downtown. But
Okay.
it's a pain
Okay.
to implement because you have to put these towers up every couple of blocks. And so as a practical matter, I don't know how big of a deal it's going to be. I'm trying to think. I can't. I mean, my iPhone supports it, and it has for about a year or two now. I don't even remember if I've ever used it before. It's not something that I encounter in everyday life. For the purposes of this budget iPhone, not
Yeah.
supporting that one feature really does not matter at all. But again, maybe Apple will add that support in the C2 or C3. But the real
Yeah.
advantage here is that because they're making the chip themselves, it according to Apple, it is the most efficient modem ever made, which
Yes.
means less battery power. Now, this
Right.
iPhone 16e has two tricks up its sleeve. One of them is this modem that's more efficient, and the other one is that it has a slightly bigger battery. And we don't know than the 16 and the 16 Pro. We don't know of the same size. We don't know if the
Ah,
main battery savings are coming from the modem or from the larger battery, but put them
interesting.
together
Okay.
and you
Yeah.
actually get, many hours more battery life with the 16E than you do with the
Wow.
16 or the 15.
Really?
So that's nice because everybody hates when your battery dies in your phone.
Right.
So that's something that everybody appreciates. And again, this is just the C1. I mean, think back to when Apple first started making its processors way back when.
Oh,
What's going to be the C2? What's going to be the C3? The hope
yeah. Yeah.
is that this is a big deal. I noticed that there was, and in fact, I linked to it today. There was an article in, was it Reuters? That was an
Yeah.
interview. I'm
That's
trying to
right.
find it up.
Here it
Yeah,
is.
it was an
Yeah.
interview with Johnny Cerrugi, if I'm
That's
pronouncing his
right.
name correctly, who is the guy that's in charge of the chips. And he was at Apple, and he was saying the C1 subsystem is the most complex technology that Apple has ever built. Now,
Right.
Apple has built some complicated technology over the year,
Yeah.
and maybe this is a little bit of, but for him to even say it means that, it's a miracle what Apple has done with its processors, the M processors, the A processors.
Yeah.
And for him to say that this is
I
even more
agree.
significant than that, I'm like, okay, maybe that's just some marketing speak. But if he do, but he certainly is qualified to know what he's talking about. And if he's being
Yeah.
honest about it, this is what makes me excited because the C1 that's in the 16E, whatever, no big deal, it's a modem, fine. But the C2, the C3, that what we're going to
Oh
see in the
yeah.
future,
Oh yeah.
wouldn't it be interesting if maybe not this year's iPhone, but like next year's iPhone or the one after that? What if another thing that sets apart the iPhone from its competitors is that something about the modem is so much better. It's so much more efficient. It's so much this, it's so much that. This is what Apple can do, and it has done in the past by
Yeah.
knowing that exactly what it's being used for using their special sauce. So this is what excites me because I think it's going to benefit all of us in the long run.
This to me is like the sleeper technology
Yeah.
from Apple, similar to what you were just started off with, is the fact that absolutely, again, it's no secret. We know Apple has been working on this for years. We know that they secretly, well, not so secretly, want to use their own modem chips, just like they're using their own processors. And I feel like it would have been too chancy to start off with like an iPhone, like, the iPhone
With the
which is
flagship
what
model, right?
exactly, which I would say the 16 or the 16 Pro. Like, we can't do that, but this is a perfect sleeper choice in the fact that they can do this. If there's some issues, I feel like they could always kind of shrug it off and be like, well, you get what you pay for, kind of
Yeah,
a thing.
exactly. It's the budget phone,
But
right?
they are gathering so much data from this, Jeff, right? I mean, they know exactly what they're doing, and they're putting it out in the wild because they've been testing this a lot, but now they've got it out in the wild with an actual product, and they're just going to be able to gather so much data as to how this works. And just to underscore what you were talking about, I feel like, for one thing, the processor for the computer and for the phone, I was like, okay, well, it's a processor, but it's really kind of its own siloed infrastructure. I mean, the processor really just has to run the computer on board, but we're talking about a modem chip, which initially, when I think about it, it's like, well, how can that be a big deal? Like, it just connects to that tower over there that I see on the skyline. But it's so much more complicated than that. Number one, it's like, we've talked about the fact that today, if there's an emergency situation, it's like the modem just doesn't connect to my AT&T. You remember that back in the day, we had to get phones that were only able to connect to one of the providers. But today, in an emergency situation, it needs to be able to compatible with all the different providers.
Correct.
With the satellite,
Correct.
you got to somehow, it has to interact with the GPS system so that I can have it even works on the Wi-Fi system. I mean, there's so much complication that goes on here, and especially when you travel now, that it's not just the providers in the United States, it's the providers all over the world. I mean, it just is so mind-blowing that once you start reading just a little bit of a hint of this, that you understand, like, oh my goodness, like, this is even so much more harder than creating your own processor. And there are so many other companies that you have to work with. And to your point again, Qualcomm, Samsung, there's only a few companies that actually even have been doing this over the years. And it's just amazing that that Apple is here now. And this gets me so much more excited for the future technologies. The only
Correct.
thing I'm nervous about is I saw one person report that it's probably too new to be in the iPhone 17 that we expect maybe to see later this year. Because it's like, I want that. Like, I want it now. I know it's going to be good and I want to see it, but I can understand that it may have to wait for another, the 17's already probably been, close to being in production already. So maybe it's too late to get it there, but that's my only hesitation. I'm like, come on, I want it. I want to see it coming out now.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the new 16E. Interesting.
Very, very cool. Just to see one chip. I want to keep talking about this. Like, I just want to see more and more people talking about that. Well, that's probably about it for the news today. I feel like we come from something that's so exciting to maybe, how about let's talk about a holder for your watch bands? Like, what a switch here. Although I remember talking about this several months ago when you mentioned this. One of our favorite companies that make accessories for Apple products is called 12 South. And I remember when they announced this, it's called the TimePorter. And basically, I feel like I don't want to under explain this, but it's basically like a little tiny shelf that you can put on the wall, mount on the wall, and it will hold all of your lovely Apple Watch bands so that you can see which one you want day to day.
Yeah, they sort of droop down, sort of connects them at the top and they droop down. And, some people just have one Apple Watch band, but, so many people, it's so easy to get bands and replace them that a lot of people have extra bands. I've got a ton of them. I've got more than I ever need.
You need this then.
Yeah,
you need
to have it.
Porter.
If I had, I keep my watch bands right on my sort of nightstand next to my bed for no particular reason. I just always have. But if you've got like a closet space or something like that, if I had the space for, and if it made sense in my life, I would totally get one of these. It's a nice way to display them. You can see the color and everything else. Where you have multiple watch bands, Brett, what do you use? Where do you keep your watch bands?
Yeah. I think I just have them in a drawer, and it's like, and the thing is, it's like, for me, I and I don't know why. I just have this thing. It's like I don't want to take the time, the 30 seconds to like switch it out. They're so easy, but I just kind of grab my Apple Watch and go. I mean, it's on all the time, and so the only thing I've done now is sometimes I'll switch between one that I typically wear like during the day, and then when I work out, I like to have another one that can grab my wrist a little bit tighter. I know you like to have your Milanese loop, from like the formal wear, as it were, for going to work. And then last week you had the red one, or the product red for Valentine's. So it's so easy to switch it out. And I do like the fact that there's something like this. I mean, 12 South has just always been such a great little accessory maker. And this is nice, called the TimePorter on here.
Yeah. So if any interest in that, take a look at the review from Andrew O'Hara and Apple Insider, because he likes it. He's had it for a while. And again, it looks to me like a solid product, and it's not very expensive. And like, I think each one holds like maybe 6 bands, but you can get 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then you can make it longer, and you can hold more bands. They connect to each other. So it's a clever product. I like it.
In the Vision, let's talk quickly about your Apple Vision Pro. I'm glad to see continuously that there is some additional content that you can see from Immersive. This one is called Arctic Surfing. I didn't know there was such a thing, but I'm glad the Apple Vision Pro, now you can watch surfers in the Arctic, Jeff. That's great.
Yeah. When I think of surfers, I think of, off the coast of Hawaii or California. You're thinking of, sandy beaches and sun. But this is the opposite. These people that go to Norway, I didn't even know this was a thing, which is
goodness. Yeah.
Let me just note parenthetically, of the many series that Apple has for the Vision Pro, this one called Boundless is the idea of like, let us show you something you've never even seen before. And the first episode was like, balloons looking over this cool part of the world. And the second one, it never even occurred to me to go to Norway to go surfing. And like these videos, it's so beautiful. And of course it's in 3D. So I'm looking around me and you see the mountains and they're covered with snow, and it's beautiful, and it's white, and it's frigid cold, but which is ironic because the Apple Vision Pro does not change the temperature in my house. And yet having this immersive experience, I felt like I was getting cold. It was really sort of funny how your sensories trick yourselves. So it's fun. I love the idea that the Vision Pro can take you somewhere else, much like, reading a book will, nice. Take us lands away. And this is a way to immersively take us somewhere else. What a great use. So it's another in the line of the great immersive videos from Apple.
You had another link here to Andrew Orr at Apple Insider about NBA 3D games. Sounds like they're coming to the Vision Pro as well.
This is not a game. It's not a game that you play. What he's doing here is, so like you're using the NBA app and you're watching a game.
Okay.
So you're watching like the actual NBA game, like like watching a video. But then in front of you, you could have like on quote unquote a table. It's a little tabletop version of the many people going around. It basically gives you the illusion of like you're actually at the stadium in a perfect seat, looking down over the game. And they're it's not the video. They're little avatars, as if it is a computer game running around, but it is an interesting way to view it. And I would love to have this for other sports too. I mean, basketball is good because it's a smaller court, so it's much smaller than football or soccer or any of those sorts of things, racing. But it's I haven't tried this yet, but it looks like a really interesting way to have just another perspective, another way to feel like you're part of the game, like you're actually there. So I love this advancements in mixed reality. I really want to see people try things like this, because in the future, 5 years from now, we'll see all sorts of stuff like this, and how fun to play around with stuff like this. It's really cool.
I want you to watch a game. What is your team in New Orleans? Is it the Pelicans? Is that
we have the Pelicans? Yep.
Yeah, the Pelicans. Watch some Pelicans on your tabletop in the Vision Pro.
Will do.
And we'll see how that goes. In the show, Jeff. I can't wait till tonight. I have binged every episode of Severance season 1 and season 2, and I am ready.
You're caught up. Wow.
I am all caught up. We went to the outside. It's like, I got to know now what's happening. It is so like it's so much nicer. Like, I almost wish that I had waited until all of the season 2 episodes came out, right? Because in fact, I was telling my wife the other night, I'm like, hey, honey, I just got to finish this episode, and she's like, okay, well, how much time do you have left? And it was just a couple of minutes left till the end, and I said, but I can't stop there at the end. You know that, like, because of this, I have to see the beginning of the next episode, and then I can stop it like at a lull in the middle of the episode. Like, that's how binge watching has changed my watching habits now. But so much fun. So now apparently I'm not the only one that's enjoying it, because you linked today that Severance surpasses Ted Lasso. So I guess, Adam S. is passing Ted Lasso now, which is amazing, to become the Apple TV Plus's most watched series with the season 2 launch, and well deserved, I would say.
Well deserved too. Season 1 was just so special, and season 2 has been just as mysterious. In fact, some of the episodes, without spoilers, but we both know that what we're talking about, that there was one that was just out. Let's just say it was outside, and it was all sorts of revelations in that one, for goodness sakes. So it's so fun, and I cannot wait for the next episode. And it's great. Apple TV Plus just has so many great shows, and this is really just one of the very best. And as you're starting to show here, they're
crazy.
To have just a regular, sponsor like State Farm, State Farm Insurance has decided to have a commercial that is set in Severance, that you're only going to really get this commercial if you're watching Severance. And so that tells you something about how many people are watching it. There was an article, I did not link to it today.
Yeah.
I didn't link to it today, but there was an article that was in Apple Insider, I believe, that was saying that this was the second time that Apple has had a commercial tie-in. They had a movie that came out a number of years ago called Luck. It was like a cartoon about like someone that's very unlucky.
Yeah. I remember that.
There was another, and I think it was an insurance company too, but they just took clips from Luck of somebody having all these unlucky things happen to them, and then said, you never know what's going to happen in life, so you should get insurance. But that wasn't something like this, where you actually have like, the State Farm person, Jake from State Farm, in the actual Severance world. So I thought it was a cute, well done commercial. So bravo to them. But it's also interesting because this doesn't happen unless you've got a hit on your hands. So if we needed one more data point to tell us that this is a great show, here we go. There's another data point.
Great stuff. I like it. Let's talk about SaneBox just for a minute here, Jeff. We are so thankful to SaneBox for sponsoring the podcast, and we hope all of you have had a chance to look at SaneBox quickly. And if you haven't, today is your day. You can go to sanebox.com/in-the-news, all one word, get some additional information about what SaneBox can do for your mailbox. And it's pretty much it's a hassle-free trial here. You don't even need to put a credit card in. You can just try it. It's not going to mess anything up with what you're doing right now in your email. In fact, if you decide you don't want to stay with it, which I think would be a little silly, but you can just switch everything back, and nothing's gonna have any issues with that. But if you do decide to continue on, we'll even give you $25 of a credit toward one of the SaneBox subscriptions, and it's well worth it. So thank you, SaneBox. Jeff, I know you've been using SaneBox for quite a while. And, what I just remembered is that not only can I just have the folders that it creates that you've talked about before available, like on my Mac, for example. I love even being able to access them. I just picked up my iPhone and was able to like jump into one of those folders on my Mac, on my Mail app, just the same as if it was on my computer. And I just like having sort of that syncing that goes on all the time there. And it's really helpful.
Yeah, in fact, we've talked in the past episodes about, what it does for you, that it, makes it so that your inbox is clean and the stuff that's not really important moves to a subfolder. Yeah. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about how it works. When you use SaneBox, it plugs into your actual mail server itself. So it's far removed from the client level that you're using it. And you should know that even though it's doing a great job of sorting your mail from a privacy standpoint, it's not reading the content of any of your messages. Everything that it does is based upon the message headers. So it looks at who the message is from and what the subject line is. And that doesn't seem like a lot of information, but believe me, it works for me. It's more than enough for it to make decisions on, this is a newsletter, so we're going to stick it over in your Sane News folder. This looks like it could be something you don't even want, maybe spam, maybe just a solicitation. So I'm going to throw that into your Sane Later folder. This looks important, so I'm going to put it into your, keep it in your regular inbox. And so it does all of that behind the scenes at the server level. And because it's just a subfolder in your mail, like you were referring to, for me, it works on my computer, it works on my iPad, works on my iPhone, works everywhere. And so it works really, really well. And you can use it with multiple accounts and stuff like that. So, that's one of the things I wanted to highlight today is you can try it out for free, which is how I first tried SaneBox many years ago. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to stick with this, but just give it a shot. I mean, it doesn't do anything destructive. It just puts a little subfolder in your inbox. If you want to delete it later, you can. And then you can just decide. And then once I started using it and having it work behind the scenes, I'm like, well, this is great that like when I go look at my inbox, I'm not wasting all this time. I mean, I can just glance at it. I can see the important emails. And then later on tonight or this weekend, then I'll take the time to actually look at the newsletters, which I do want to look at some point. I just don't want to be like interrupted with them in real life. So I really like the way it works. It doesn't replace your spam folder. I mean, that's a separate thing that your spam folder is done by your mail provider, and that does analyze the contents. If it looks like it's a message that's trying to, get you to send money to somebody in another part of the world, or, advertising some, whatever, cheap Viagra or whatever the stupidity is, that's the stuff that it's going to like, yeah, that's spam. This doesn't do that. And yet many of the messages that it moves away from me are messages that I would consider spam. So it's like spam adjacent, even if it's not really a spam filter. And then of course the messages from something, some advertiser you never want to hear from again. Yeah. You could go and you could click the unsubscribe button and hopefully that works. But I always wonder if clicking the unsubscribe button is just telling them, hey, you got a real email address here. So maybe you're not going to send things from company A anymore, but go ahead and sell my email address to companies B through Z. So I just throw it into the sane black hole and they never know it, and I will never see it again, and it just gets rid of it. So anyway, so that's how SaneBox works behind the scenes, and it's because of the way that it works. It's so easy to turn off. If you don't find it useful for you, that's fine. But then again, if you do find it useful, give it a shot. So thumbs up.
Just a quick shout out to their support pages. In fact, I just quickly, within like 3 clicks, went to how do I find my email server settings. They do a great job of providing instructions for like if you're on Office 365 or Exchange, Apple Mail, Zoho Mail, GoDaddy, wherever you are. They have all of these instructions here. You can just follow it. And again, I'm no like email server, expert of any kind. And so sometimes I get a little nervous about like, do I have to make any changes or anything in there? But it's so easy just to follow the instructions on here. And in fact, you can even go to your SaneBox, like I call it the dashboard. I think that's the official word for it. But you can even, make some of those changes or differences there. So it's not like you really have to go into your back end. And to me, that's just really helpful on that. So thank you, SaneBox, for your support of In the News podcast. You can find more information by going to sanebox.com/inthenews, all one word, sanebox.com/inthenews. And we thank them again for their support of our podcast. In the Know. Let's talk about, there's a quick little tip I just wanted to share because I stumbled upon it again, even though I know we've talked about this, but with the last couple of updates to iOS over the last couple of years, we now have so much more freedom to be able to customize sort of the way, not just the home screen, but like where your apps are located and how they even look. Like you can put a tint on them. But one of the things I just was going to highlight today was going to the home screen and making a choice of whether you still want to have the names of your apps underneath the little app icon, or you can just quickly change it to what they call the large app icons. And so it takes away those words. And it's really easy to do. Similar to the way that, if you wanted to move around apps before, you would tap and hold on an app and go into what I always call jiggly mode. They do, Apple does call it jiggle, but they don't call it jiggly mode. I wish they would. But instead of like tapping and holding on an app to move the app, one of the things you can do, if you just put your finger in like an empty space on one of your home screens and hold it down, you will go into jiggly mode. And at the top left now, you'll see a little edit button. Now you can do several things with that edit button, but what I was going to highlight today was if you tap the customize option, you'll get a little tiny bar at the very bottom of your screen. And there's just a few little options here. One is you can change it from a different light or dark. You can do that really quickly, even though there's other ways you can do that from the control panel. But right at the very top of that little section at the bottom, that little panel at the bottom, there is a small and a large toggle. And if you just tap on large, you'll immediately see your app icons get just a little bit bigger, which in a way I feel like they look a little cartoonish to me, but I think, Jeff, that's just because I'm so used to seeing it, the regular way. But when you go into that large mode, it will actually take off the little names of the apps, or if you have folders like I do, it'll take off the name of the folder, but you can still see what's in there. And most of the time, we recognize the pages all the time, but you can just quickly toggle back and forth between small and large, and you can see which one that you like. I guess you could even do this kind of on the fly. If at some point you wanted something to look a little bit bigger or smaller, you could do that. So you just tap and hold on an empty area on your home screen, go into jiggling mode, tap the edit button in the top left corner, go to customize, and you'll see that little panel at the bottom there. And there's a few other things you can do. It'd be fun to play around with that just a little bit, but I was just going to emphasize the small versus large toggle that you can see there. Change up your home screen a little bit.
Very cool. Very cool suggestion. I like that. Sometimes when we do our suggestions, Brett, it's like something brand new you probably have never heard of before. The one that you just did might be an example of that for some people. And then sometimes
Right.
we have tips that are like, you probably should have known this, but it was a good reminder. And those are sometimes even more valuable.
Like
and so
those.
here's an example of that one. Let me give you the background first before I get to the tip. So I've been noticing for the last couple of weeks that when I would talk to my Apple Watch, like, you hold up your Apple Watch close to your mouth. And if you have it set up that way, you can just talk to, you can say, hey, who, and you can say, I want to do something like, turn on my dining room light or set a timer or whatever. And I was noticing it just wasn't working as well anymore. And sometimes I would think I'm talking to my watch and instead my HomePod would take the command. I'm like, whatever. In my mind, Brett, I thought it was just Siri being Siri. Sometimes Siri doesn't work well, and that is what it is.
Siri.
And I'm like, oh, Siri, exactly. But then it got to the point this past weekend where like it just wasn't responding at all. Like even when on the Apple Watch, if you hold down that button at the top, the one with the crown on it, if you hold it down, it will start listening. You don't have to say, hey, who. You can just hold that down and you'll see the screen that it's like listening, and you can just say your command, like, set a timer or, turn off this light. And it wasn't working. I'm like, what's going on? And so then I tried the voice memo app. This was Sunday morning. I'm like, let me try the voice memo app on the Apple Watch.
Weird.
And like, it was like nothing. It's not picking up anything. So then like I tell my daughter, take a second, call me. I'm going to answer the phone call on my watch. And I did, and I could hear her voice perfectly fine, but like she did not hear me at all. I'm like, darn it, my microphone's not working. Like that's why this is not happening. So I'm like, what do I do? And I didn't know what to do. So the one thought that occurred to me is, it's Sunday morning. Let me see if there's any spots open at the Genius Bar at Apple store, and I'll bring it in there. So I made an appointment for 2:00. And then I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I hate to have to drive all the way out to the Apple store. What could it be? And then it realized, what? Maybe there's just something in the microphone. I mean, I looked at it and I couldn't.
Little hole.
I mean, I didn't see anything in the little hole, but so I reminded myself, and I went to this Apple page that you're showing right now. If your microphone or speaker isn't working as expected on your Apple Watch, number one, update your Apple Watch, which I had already done. But number two is clean it. And so we've talked about in the past, and I myself should have thought about this, but I had forgotten that you can take your Apple Watch, if you've got a nice band, take it off, or if you just have a plastic one or whatever, it doesn't matter. But I took off my watch bands. I had my watch, and then you turn on some, I think it says like warm water. It's not hot water,
lightly running, cold, just warm, fresh water.
There you go.
That's what it
says.
And
so I just ran the water over it, and I had like a little brush thing. I sort of lightly brushed in the microphone. Again, I didn't see anything in it, but I mean, it's so tiny. What do I know? And so then, and then I dried it off with a microfiber cloth, and suddenly, Brett, everything works great.
What?
Like
that was it?
That was it. It was so simple. It took me 10 seconds to fix. And I'm like, maybe like, I don't know, some lotion got in there or some speck of dust or whatever it was. And and like I said, this has been happening over time. So it must have been like a little, and it's the silliest thing, it's something is, clean it up and it gets fixed. It's such an obvious thing, but it didn't even occur to me. And so that's my reminder is number one, you can clean, even though it seems bizarre that you can put your Apple Watch underwater. Obviously you can go swimming with an Apple Watch, so it's okay with water, especially nice clean water. And again, this took me no time at all, and now my microphone is perfect. I mean, since then, it's like hearing me better than ever. Siri is still not always perfect, but at least it's hearing me now.
Okay, but
so
that's
great.
that's not the microphone fault.
I was so happy to cancel that Genius Bar appointment.
Oh, nice.
And now my watch is working again. So that is my tip for you. If you don't think that I mean, Apple Watches don't make noise too much, but if it doesn't seem like you're hearing what you should be hearing through the speaker, or if it doesn't seem like it's hearing you as it should be through the microphone, remember to wash your Apple Watch under some water and see if that fixes it. It was great for me.
Which just sounds so contrary to what you should do. But like you said, we've talked about this before, and I have come to a comfort level after cleaning my watch several times. For me, it usually is the digital crown doesn't like flow as quickly as it normally does. And I came to this page of several months ago, maybe a year or two ago, and I'm like, really? Like I'm gonna run it underwater? Are you kidding me? And it worked perfectly. Just a few things quickly on this, because people may be asking. Don't use cleaning liquids. Like don't use, don't spray anything on it. Don't use
no detergent, no soap,
non-detergent. Exactly. And they also say down here, like, don't try to poke a toothpick into the microphone hole. Like don't try to do anything. Like truly just running it underwater and drying it off with a lint-free cloth will work wonders for it. And then just the last thing quickly on this, Jeff, I don't know if you did this, and I don't see that they are, if they're doing, they say don't shake the Apple Watch to remove water, but there is that mode you can put your Apple Watch in to expunge water out of it, right? Like after you go swimming, you can go into, like, I forget what they call it exactly, but you can get into your little control panel in the Apple Watch and you can hit the little, it's like a little water drop, right? And it will like shake and everything. And if water was in the speakers, for example, it'll spit that out as well. Doesn't sound like that you went and did that as the last step, but you can do that after to just to make sure that it like it spits out all the water that it needs to spit out. But I feel like that's such a great tip, and it's okay. Like it's okay to put your watch under running water, lightly running warm fresh water. Like even when I say it, I'm like, what am I saying? I cannot believe I'm saying it, but it works. It works, and it works very well. So thank you. I'm glad that your watch can hear you now, and your wife can hear you, and you were able to cancel the Genius Bar. That's really great. Good stuff on that. Just want to say thanks again to SaneBox for sponsoring sanebox.com/in-the-news. Thank you as always, and thank all of you for listening. And Jeff, we'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.